Hello, who am I here with today?
My name is Govind Ramanan. Uh, you
And
know,
yeah, keep going.
now I'm a junior, rising senior, and I've been fencing for 6 years.
Very nice, very nice. And Govind, what got you into fencing?
So it was actually my passion for Star Wars. My mom also wanted me to get into like a martial art, and there was no real like karate like dojo around where we were, but there was a fencing place. So I got shipped off to do fencing, and I really love the sport, and I kind of stuck with it for until now.
Very nice, very nice. And did you start taking it like competitively right as you started, or was it a couple years in?
It was kind of right as I started, just more in the local area. But then, fencing has kind of like a linear progression. So you go like local, regional, the kind of pre-nationals or like SYCs, super youth circuits, and then you go to NAGs, North American Cups. So it was all pretty all pretty like linear, and basically like right as I started.
Okay, very interesting. Well, Govind, how would you say like your surroundings have affected you like taking competitively? Did you always have this mindset? Because I was assuming you were like what, 10, 11 when you started?
Yeah.
So it's like, would you say it was your parents that pushed you to start taking it competitively off the bat, or would you say it was just your mindset always towards anything?
I think it was kind of my mindset. I'm kind of a pretty competitive person by nature. My parents are less so. So I actually asked them, hey, can I start competing? And they said yes. So I think it was primarily like me, but pushing my environment instead of the other way around.
Oh, very nice. Well, what would you say has been the hardest path of like going competitively, mentally, physically, even socially?
Yeah, like mentally, there's like a big aspect of mental in fencing, and I think the biggest like issue for me there was kind of overcoming the fact that like I always get like tense when before fencing. I always get like a little bit nervous, and that causes my muscles to lock up a little bit. I don't like move as fluidly as I normally would be able to. That was kind of the biggest thing I had to work on personally, just getting more loose, kind of relieving myself of all the stress and anxiety that comes before a tournament. Then obviously physically, I haven't had that many injuries, but the ones I've had have been pretty big.
Yeah.
I had one where like the muscles on my spine kind of like started ripping, because when I lunged, I kind of threw myself, and that kind of caused like a bit of a tear in the muscles on the side of your spine. So I've had to go to PT for that. I have some like persistent hip issues because of that, I think. But overall, it's better, much better now. And I've been competing all throughout that injury. But those were really the big two injuries I've had.
Would you say like emotionally you were affected when you were physically injured? Like, was it hard when you stepping away from fencing or like taking it slower?
I mean, definitely, yeah. Especially when you're like really going up, like you feel like you're performing super well. Like even a small blow can kind of really affect you and kind of throw off your mental game. And this was a big blow to me, especially when I was performing really well, the best I had ever been doing, and then this kind of shot me that back down to like mentally zero, but physically and like skill wise, I had all the skills that I had been honing for years. But it really was a bit of a block in my path.
And how did you recover from it mentally? Like, did you go to therapy or like did you talk to people about it? What did you do?
It kind of improved as I went to physical therapy to
Okay.
kind of fix that injury. And it kind of improved as my injury healed. And then later when it kind of flared up again, I was in like I was in a better mental state because I'd already gone through it. Because I adapt pretty quickly and I was kind of prepared to tackle on the issue when it like reoccurred. So I think like that kind of was like the spring of like my mental toughness, so to speak.
Okay, for sure. Well, I'm sure that this helped you with like consistent training, but how would you say you locked in during training? Because I'm sure you train what, like double digit hours per week?
Yeah, definitely. Um, so I mean, training, I love training. I love the sport, obviously, so that makes it a lot easier. I couldn't imagine playing a sport that's not fencing. And I think that's kind of the biggest thing about it. Like, since I just I love fencing, like every part of your practice leads up to competition.
Yeah.
So even when like you're training something, like when you're warming up, you're doing your footwork, you're doing your blade work, you're doing your conditioning, you're doing your strength training, like all that leads to fencing. And then like I think all that kind of coalesces into like a fantastic training experience for me. I think just like because I love the sport so much, that adds like to my love for training as well.
Okay. I mean, it's still a really mental sport. So, like, let's say before a competition, right? Would you ever
Yeah.
say like you still have anxiety or like you psych yourself out? And if so, like, how would you cope with that?
Oh no, definitely. Yeah. I still like I get stressed, I get nervous before every tournament. But the way I deal with that is like I visualize like my opponent, right? They're going through the exact same thing as I am. Like I mean, tournament jitters is very common. I think it's common in every sport. And just if you realize that your opponent has kind of the same mental state as you can kind of push yourself to elevate above that. Because like I kind of go for any edge I can. And if this is an edge I can have over my opponent, like a mental edge, which is super helpful, I'm gonna go for that. I'm gonna try to like make sure I'm as calm as possible. To like kind of like see any small movements, any openings in my opponent's like game plan. It's really my goal.
You study your opponent, I would assume.
Sometimes, yeah. A lot of times you're not able to, but when I can, I watch their bouts beforehand and I see what they're doing, which is helpful.
Okay. Well, could you walk us through like one of your proudest wins if you have that remembered?
Definitely, yeah. I think it was in November 2023. Um, and this was like coming off the injury that I spoke about earlier, the crazy hip injury in that summer. So I was already like, and I was slowly getting back in like the same rut, where I was like going back on the up. But this was kind of special. I did okay in pools. I had 5 victories and 1 loss. That 1 loss kind of really set my attitude down, but I managed to jump back up before the table or the direct elimination. And in that, I kind of just steamrolled my way. It felt fantastic. I felt like I was moving super fluidly. And I think that was the biggest thing because I'd already like I had a loss in pools, so I just thought, okay, I'll fence as well as I can in direct eliminations. It doesn't really matter. I'm just gonna go for it. I think because of that, I was able to like fence a lot more, with like a lot more force in my actions and less weight on my back. And because of that, I was able to like win pretty stress free. And then even when I was down, I was able to bring it back up. And that really pushed me like to top 8 of a North American Cup, which I was super happy with at the time. And then on that, like I finally like ended because like I started cramping up. And now I obviously I have precautions to deal with that, like eating bananas, but pickle juice, for example, stretching, drinking more water. And I didn't do any of these on the tournament or the night before. So that was, another like a learning opportunity, really.
For sure. Would you say like that mental freeness you ever try to replicate, or like would you say you've been able to catch that usually off late in your tournaments?
So I've actually really struggled with this one, like kind of getting the mental freeness, because every time I'm mentally like I'm trying to force it, and I think that's something I'm still trying to work on. It happened at the recent like a tournament. I was able to kind of get in the flow more, because I lost to this guy in pools. I went 5-1, and then I fenced him again in direct eliminations, and I beat him. And my mentality there was very similar to the one I had earlier, whereas like I already lost to this guy. There's nothing to lose here, so I just go for it, and that's something I've been trying to replicate more and more. And it's interesting because I get that feeling a lot more in practice. But I just have trouble kind of bringing it out in tournament when the stress is like so much higher and your result really matters.
Okay, very nice. Would you say like you've noticed a pattern of how to catch it? Like, would you say maybe when you feel nothing to prove, it's easier to gain?
Yeah, I think that's definitely true. I feel like when I was ranked higher in like in cadet or U17 before I
Yeah.
aged out, I was like stressed when I was fencing someone who's lower ranked than me because I was like, okay, if I lose this, my ranking is going to drop, or if I lose this, I won't get as many points. And since I moved up to juniors or U19, like the stress has really been off my back. It's been like much more relaxing, and hopefully I don't get the same stress when I move back up the rankings in U19. Hopefully I've adapted past then, but we'll see, we'll see.
Very nice. Well, on the flip side, could you share like an opposite experience, like one loss that you felt like just stuck with you that I assume you also took stuff away from?
Yeah, so I obviously like fencing is a sport where you're gonna lose a bunch. One loss stuck with me. I was in my first international tournament in Bulgaria, and I was fencing, and I did well in pools. I went 6-0. I was 20th out of 270 out of pools. I was like, okay, it's my time to shine. Come the ease, I fenced an opponent who is like 160th out of pools. And the bout is way closer than it should have been. I still win, but it was super close. And then because I was like locking up, I was super stressed. The
Yeah.
moment the guy got 3 points on me, 3 points in a row, like that really stuck in my head. And I just like got myself into a rut of being like, oh no, like what's gonna happen? And I like locked up and kind of what I was speaking about earlier. But I won that one just because, I like fundamentals. And I moved on, 64s. And I was fencing this guy. I'm still much higher out of pools than he is. And I lose this one, and I lose 15-14. I lose about 1 point. And this loss really stuck with me, for a couple of reasons. Like I could have blamed the ref, but I don't think it was the ref's fault. Like for most of the majority of the touches, I think it was primarily my actions being too like, you could have gone either way. Like they were very
Oh,
contentious. And that was the biggest thing that I noticed about my fencing at the time. I kind of really relied on the ref to call that action. And then B, the same thing happened where my legs were locking up, my body was super tense, and a bunch of other issues like that. And that really kind of stuck with me. And I've been trying to work on that. I think flexibility kind of comes down to that because even when you tense up, you're still gonna be pretty you're gonna be able to move fluidly. So that's the biggest aspect. And of course, the mental aspect is super important. That's the key takeaway there. But
And I assume like off that loss, you've been trying to improve, making sure that these things never happen again, probably within your training or within your future competitions.
yeah, I think that's been going pretty well actually. I think I've been winning my last few 15, 14 or close bouts, so to say. And that's been going pretty well. I've been really moving more fluidly, trying to like in practice, like try not to win, but just like to win by a larger margin, to make sure like I really hone my skills in that way. Like practice winning, in a sense. So that's really been what I've been trying to work on.
Here's a question I have for you. When it comes down to like those 15, 14, 15, 13, or 15, 12, like how do you not get nervous? 'Cause I remember when I used to fence like these, when it got higher in points towards like one other, they were basically same scores. I'll start getting in my head a lot and like start thinking about the future. Did that ever happen to you? Or like how do you fix that? Or what do you do in that situation?
Yeah, definitely. No, that happened to be a lot. It's less now, and that's because you kind of have to ground yourself, like feel your feet, feel where your feet are placed on the strip. And when you start moving, when the ref says fence, like you really gotta hone it on your senses. Like one thing is like you kind of gotta block out your brain a little bit. Like you have to pick an action, say, okay, I'm gonna run with this action. If you're gonna make a preparation, you say, okay, I'm sticking with this prep, no last minute changes. You feel your hand, you feel your feet, you feel like where your body's positioned. You stick with that action the whole time. And that's really been working for me recently. Just like feeling like just like focusing on your senses and kind of cutting off your brain. Been
Okay.
working well.
So it's like living in the moment completely, not thinking about anything.
Yeah.
Well, how important would you say like community is within your fencing? Like other fencers, I know your brother's a very competitive fencer, your coaches, your teammates, parents. How would you say that affects your fencing?
Oh, I think it's very nice. I have a great coach right now, Coach Nicholas Rousset. He's fantastic. I think he really pushes me to work hard, but like pushes me to really put in my 100% in practice. And I just think that like kind of compounds when I have my community behind me. My brother is a fantastic training partner. I've been training with him for basically like my whole fencing career, and it's fantastic having someone who how they fence and you're just constantly working on how to improve. And it's like iron sharpens iron in that kind of sense. Additionally, I feel like there's a fencing community outside of the local area, and I have a lot of friends who are on the East Coast, in Texas, in Southern California, and I think like the kind of like national community of fencing is very, very strong because of that.
Very nice, very nice. Um, what advice would you give to a younger fencer, like a less competitive fencer that would want to follow your path?
Biggest advice is like really, really hone on like so it's an action and fencing called your prep. And I'd say like really pick a prep at like the beginning of your fencing and just kind of stick with that and really improve on that. As long as your coach says it's a good prep, really just really, really work on that. But that's kind of the fundamental to all your fencing. You can change it, you can tweak it a little bit later on. But that's like the biggest part of it. And be more athletic. That always helps, like especially at like a younger age. I think the reason I was able to do so well was because I was just more athletic than a lot of fencers. And obviously now the athletic gap is lessened because everyone's kind of got realized that. But it was really helpful for me in like the nascent years of my fencing.
Very nice. You think you would ever become a coach as a side hustle?
No,
Why not?
I mean, maybe as a side hustle, but I think coaching is very fulfilling. I already ref though. I ref fencing, and I think coaching is good. I do coach actually, but I think I coach younger athletes, and I think coaching older athletes requires a higher prerequisite of skill that I don't have.
Fair, fair, fair. Well, how would you say fencing shaped you outside of like the sport itself? Would you say it's affected your personality and like your values?
Yeah, I think like being persistent is something that kind of echoes across basically everything I do,
Yeah.
and being like putting like 100% of your effort, really working hard, being diligent, being focused, kind of enjoying the mundane aspects of practice has kind of really translated super well into like my academic career, and everything like my extracurriculars. And like I think in a way, fencing has been like the most impactful thing I've done for my psyche, and I think it's been super helpful overall.
Wow, I assume you could not imagine your life without fencing now.
Not at all, not at all.
Well, Govind, one last question. I don't mean to put you on the spot, but who's better, you or your brother?
Um, right now, I'd say me. He's been slacking a little bit. He's in New York. I'm here. I've been training. He's been not been training. So right now, me,
Fair play, Govind. Thank you so much for your time. This was a very nice interview.
of course. Thank you, Tiff.